It's just me. Marwan is busy in Seattle today, and we didn't have enough time to put a guest in, so we decided we'd. I decided I'd fly this alone and do a shorter podcast than most, and focus on talking about things that matter. And in this case, the way we assume things, the way we delude ourselves, and the reality of how we live together. Now, in the past, we have talked about social contracts and how um, we just don't understand that we have contracts in place for us to live together. Um, and because we don't understand this, and because it isn't inherent in our education, we tend to not pay any attention to them, and we tend to focus on the messaging of how important we are and how community just happens, and there's no work in between that we have to pay any attention to, and we have to make sure that we are all okay. And it's kind of a twisted way of going about the fact that we're all in a really bad place. So let's talk about that a little bit. I'm going to bring up a presentation, and you'll have to bear with me on the technology of this. I'm not entirely certain how all of this works, but I'm going to give it a shot and see if we can go through a brief slide presentation about some things to think about. So I'm going to hold on just a second. I want to make sure that everything is the way it's supposed to be. Okay, you should all be seeing a slide now, or you will be in a moment as soon as I bring my window back up and share it. Okay, there we go. All right, so let me start this puppy up. It's only about 5 slides, 6 slides probably total if you include the total and the header slide. And I'm sorry for stumbling so much. It's just this is different. Okay, so let's talk about poverty, wealth, and the future. We have all of these things that we are being told uh, we need to do to have a future in the world of climate change, period. And those things all include costs. And not all of the things work as well as we would like them to work. So let's go to starting to talk about some of the parameters, the foundation for this, and we'll go to talking about some of the things that we need to think about. All right. So we have an inequality in approach. We've talked about this before. In our current world, we have 46% of the U.S. population is one paycheck away from homelessness. But that's one paycheck away. What about the people that are homeless? I've looked at the numbers for Kitsap County where I live, and I cannot make any sense of them. It said 1,700 and some odd people were homeless in Kitsap County, and I know the number is much higher than that. I'm guessing that that's true nationwide, that the numbers being presented are not accurate. I won't say bogus because counting people who are homeless is really hard. They don't have an address. They don't have any way to track them. They don't have any way for us to know or anybody to know who they are and where they are. The only way that we know, that they are there is if they come in and try and get services, and many of them don't. We tend to paint with a broad brush, thinking that these people are all drug addicts and crazy, when a great many of them work for a living and just don't have enough money to make bills and have a house. So let's talk about that in a moment. Um, we have corporations have an undue influence on all legislation and favor themselves and their investors. Human needs are treated like commodities, which we started out the program talking about, and making so much unattainable for people and creating more homelessness. Um, and we talk about shelter, food, power, education. All of the messaging around that feeds into this mad case of dehumanizing us for profit. And to give you one example of this, the CEO of Nestle Corporation made a statement a few years ago that water is not a right for people to have, and it is a commodity for corporations to sell, and that we should just get used to that. heinous as that is, it's the most honest statement I've heard coming from a CEO of a corporation. Um, the thing is, we tend to think that these are problems that cannot be overcome, but the numbers that the counties and the cities are seeing look like a problem that can be overcome. But then there's other problems again, like the drug use and the craziness and all the things we assume around people who are homeless. Now, a human world is more open and transparent. We pressure from the bottom up. We manage from the top down. We have unbiased education, which we do not have at this time. And anybody who wants to have that conversation, show up on Saturday at 10:30, and I'll be happy to have that conversation with you. Healthcare is not a right. It is not something that is guaranteed. It is a for-profit corporation or series of corporations, and even when they're nonprofit, it's about making money at some point. Um, it is not good. It has been decreasing in quality over the last 40 years that I know of, and it is not getting better now. I can find source material for you on quality and service, and people will argue that the technology is better, the science is better, but the delivery is not. We don't have food or water guaranteed to us. We don't have shelter, obviously, guaranteed to us because we have homelessness. And resource management is, we overuse our resources continually. You know, you've heard all of this from us at one point or another in the other shows. Let's talk about what's going on today and kind of like bring this into focus for you. All right, this is from the Resilient Ecosystems website. If a person's making $20 an hour, 40 hours a week, they make $3,466 per month. That's pre-tax. After taxes, it's about $2,850. The national average for rent right now is about $1,600 per month. Some a little lower, some a little higher, but let's use that number for the average for this. That leaves $1,250 to live on for utilities, buying groceries, car payments, or transportation. And public transportation is nothing to scream home about, at least not in our county. It's better in other places. The best I've ever seen is in the Bay Area. Um, but even that is not spectacular. There are other models we could be using. But transportation, including gas, insurance, clothing, healthcare, etc., and we know healthcare is very expensive. Um, Even with all the assistance that is provided, uh, no one can make that at this. And for a moment, I just want to make a note about Social Security. Nobody lives on Social Security. Nobody. It is not enough money to live on. It is enough money to help you if you have other income, but it is not enough money to live on. So if you're living, people living on Social Security, which there are a large number of in this country, they might as well be homeless because they're right on the edge of it. There's not enough resources for them to have shelter and get good food. And the SNAP program that has been under attack for so long does not provide money to people who make Social Security because you're making too much money to get the SNAP program. It's just none of the dots connect here, and people are struggling. So this is an inhumane way. And $20 an hour is not what most people make starting out these days. In Washington State, you're lucky to get 15, but the national average is $7.25 an hour. Now there are places that are cheaper to live, but 7.25 an hour is not enough to live even there. To talk about just getting by, and I'm going to skip the numbers up above, but if basically the university studies have come out, and I think it was Purdue and maybe um, might have been Stanford. I have to go dig them up, but it worked out that to break even in this country and actually have a life, you need to be making about $48,000 a year. In Kitsap County, the average uh, income that is measured for market rate housing is 104,000 for two people with two children. Now, I don't know about anybody else in Kitsap County, but I don't know that many people in Kitsap County that are bringing in $104,000 a year. And I certainly don't think that's the average here. Yet that's the average that's used to measure what a market rate rent is. And most people I know can't afford that. So we are being paid too little to live. Prices continue to go up and pricing us out of our areas where we provide service and have income or and have our jobs. And transportation isn't good enough to get us there, and we continually go into debt at some ridiculous usury rate of 27% interest on credit cards. Now let's look at more realities along this line. Let's go back to what we originally started talking about. All right. So right now, gas stoves, and maybe rightfully so, I haven't really looked at the data, are under attack as unsafe and providers of greenhouse gases that make people sick in their homes, that constantly leak. And the reports say that it doesn't matter how high end of stove you have, you're still leaking gases like benzene into the house, which are potentially carcinogenic, which could make you sick and make your family sick. So, but a gas stove, I went on Craigslist and looked. I could find a good working gas stove for about $50. They can go as high as $3,500, and there are probably some out there that are more. I didn't do extensive shopping, but a gas stove is affordable, and most rental units will put the cheapest thing they can put into the house. Now, there is electric here, and we're not talking about that right now. But if you're going to something that's more efficient and is more usable for cooking and is more greenhouse and climate change friendly, you're looking at induction. Now, an induction stove starts, the lowest price I was able to find was 800 or maybe even a little bit more. A hot plate, single burner hot plate for induction is about $1,000, roughly $600 to $1,000. I saw them as high as $4,500. Again, this is a 30-inch stove. I did not do a lot of extensive searching. And while they have the same aptitude as gas, they heat up quickly, they cool down quickly, they have a lot of good temperature control. They're more easy to damage. But more importantly, they have not perfected the technology yet. They are set up to have 6-inch, 8-inch, and 10-inch burners. Some have 12-inch burners, the more expensive ones. And they only heat the part of the pan that is touching or that is covered by the magnet in the induction system. So I don't know about the rest of you, but I have 12-inch pans I use all the time, which will only heat in the center. The rest of it will be cold. Not ideal for somebody who actually cooks. I think that there are ways to get around that, but I'm no scientist. I think that there are technology that needs to be developed that hasn't been. I know that in Europe they're being adopted far more quickly than here. Here we've got about 1% coverage. Cost is a huge issue of this. So again, greenhouse gas and climate change, dealing with a human future in a non-polluting way and the climate-friendly way is going to cost far more money than most people make. So what do you do? How do you go around that? Let's talk about cars for a moment. A few years ago, and it keeps coming back, there's bills that are trying to get passed where we tax gas to a much higher level to start driving people to go to hybrid and electric cars. One wonderful idea. However, I can buy a working car on Craigslist for about $1,500. Lower than that, they all had problems. I can buy a car up to $70,000. But at $1,500, a lot of people can make that work. They can they can have a car to get to and from work if public transportation doesn't help them. If you go to a hybrid car, I found the cheapest price working Prius I found on Craigslist was $7,500. The highest price is for Mercedes. That was $104,000 new. Still, much while the Prius at $7,500 is more reasonable, it's still out of the price range of a lot of people, like 40 to 50% of the people in this country. That's a problem that has to be overcome before we can convert to an all electric society. And that's not even talking about our electrical infrastructure having not been upgraded since the 1960s. The fact that solar is still being played a shell game to get it on few people's roofs because the utilities don't want to make the major investment, and they haven't put any of the management pieces in place that need to be put in place. So these are the two of the examples, but hybrid is still a problem because it's a hybrid. It uses a gas engine. So to go where we need to go to EV or electric vehicles. The cheapest electric vehicle I was able to find was $20,000. That was a Nissan Leaf. And they go all the way up to $181,000. And these are production cars. These are not special custom cars. And that is out of the price range of most people in most of the working class. And they're the ones who need to use the cars. We have a problem about the goal and the ability to get there. That's reality. Now, I'm going to say it harsh and cold right now. As everybody thinks that it's somebody else's problem and that the people who are homeless, it's all their problem. And if they weren't crazy and they weren't drug users, and we don't count for the mortgage debacle, which put a lot of people out of their homes. We didn't talk about COVID and how that put a lot of people out of work. We yell and scream on Facebook about the lazy people who aren't going back to work and wondering how they're making a living through side hustles. Oh, by the way, if you're going to do a side hustle with Uber, you have to have a working car. That's part of the deal. So paying attention to those things brings up a whole lot more questions about how we're going to get to the future. It's nice to think that we're going to do that. And that a gas tax, which will hurt a vast majority of the people here and only benefit the people who can afford to buy hybrids and electric cars, that's a problematic way of thinking. It is. We are human beings. We need to think about the human way to do things. Give me just a second. I'm going to cut out of this slideshow now, and we'll go back to looking at my face for whatever that's worth and talk about the rest of this. So, being a human being means taking care of each other, looking at the cause and effect of what is bringing us to this end. If you read the book Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, he lays out a really compelling story about how we stepped off a more human path about 15,000 years ago and have become essentially the Star Trek Borg and assimilating other cultures and creating wealth for few, and the rest are indentured servitude to a great degree. And if you don't think that's true, think about how long you could go without a job, how far you can make it without making money. You're not going to have a house, you're not going to have a car, you're not going to have anything. And then people will be looking at you going, "You lazy person, you use too many drugs, it's all your fault. And I have no responsibility for this. The corporations have no responsibility for this." Is that human? Or is looking at our environment, our culture, our way of doing things, our lack of understanding of social contracts and behavior with each other, is that part of the problem? We need to start looking at the problem, not the things we're told are the problem. We need to stop othering each other. We need to stop paying attention to all of the things that say we are better than somebody else because they're hurting more than us. That's just wrong. And we can fix this, but we have to fix it together. And this is not some sales pitch. I am not trying to sell you on donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to our organization. What I am trying to get you to do is come and engage with us and have conversations that could lead us to a place where we can start changing what's going on and what the bad things are. And I'm going to be honest here. This is generational work. I won't be alive to see, the fruition of a lot of the things we're pushing now. And a lot of the things that will happen then, I will never have imagined because I'm too limited to know that, but other people will. My daughter will. Your children will. You will. We'll find a better way to be, but we have to come together to do it. And so today it's about, the delusions we have, the assumptions we make, because they're so much easier than doing the work of seeing the problems and coming together. And everybody goes, "Oh my God, it's so hard. We can't do this. We can't overcome this. We can't make this right. What can I possibly do?" Well, alone, to be honest, not much. But together, we can change everything. Question is, are you willing to come together and overcome your fear of others and reach out and have meaningful conversations about our humanity. This is what embracing humanity is. And if you come to the workshop on Saturday at 12:30 at the Bremerton Library, bring your answer. What is embracing humanity? What does that mean? Because that was the question that was asked last week. Join us on Saturday at 10:30 at Cups Cafe on 4th and Pacific, and have a cup of coffee with us and talk, or come to the workshop and join us for a discussion about where we go and changing your perspective about how things are and how we can solve these problems. Thank you for the time. While this may not be the best hour of your week this week, I hope it was educational. Thank you very much.